two countries on the entire planet that does not recognize or allow divorce. Number one, Vatican City. Number two, the Philippines. Philippines, over 100 million people with a median age of about 26 or 27. Once married, there is no exit strategy. Is that going to change? Is there legislation pending right now that may make that different? That's exactly what I'm going to cover in the upcoming video. Here it comes. Alrighty, so if you're a married person back in my home country in America, and you're together one day, 1 week, 1 month, 10 years, it doesn't matter. If you guys agree to disagree and you no longer want to be married, well, divorce is as easy or as hard as the two of you want to make it. A couple of little factoids on American divorce, and then I'll get right back to the Philippines, is things haven't changed much in the last 5 years since I looked into this. 50% of new marriages, first-time marriages in America, will end in divorce. And another interesting factoid that I wasn't aware of was, depending on who you talk to or listen to, 70 to 80% of those divorces are initiated by the wife, the female, asks for the divorce. And if you drill down on that, I was listening just the other day to a female divorce attorney who's been handling divorces for years, and her clients are primarily female. And she says that the primary reason that the women confide in her as to why they want a divorce is, are you ready for this? Boredom. It's not like they're getting beat up. It's not like the guy comes home and there's domestic violence, even though that occurs. And of course, that's part of the equation in some of these divorces. But the majority of it is the women have just flat out gotten bored of waking up, rolling over, and looking at, some guy named Lou who just doesn't excite her anymore. And so, to me, that is just kind of odd, but it is what it is. So, I just thought that would be an interesting factoid, that the 50% rate on first-time marriages is still in effect. It's been like that for some time. But I didn't know that 70 to 80% of the divorces were initiated by the women, and that the primary reason is because they're just flat out bored. They're talking to their girlfriends, they're talking to their coworkers, they're going here, they're going there, and they're seemingly being almost brainwashed into thinking that they can one-up the guy or do better than they're doing, or there's just no more chemistry left. I don't pretend to understand that, but I'm sure it's happening, since that's what the math shows. But let's get back here to the good old Philippines. Philippines, once you're married, that's it. I don't care how bored you are, male or female, you're stuck. There is no such thing as a divorce. There is a thing called annulment. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And that is a very costly, very timely, long drawn out, expensive process that nobody wants to go through, and very few people even make the effort. There is such a thing as a legal separation, but you're still considered to be married. So you're allowed to live apart, but you cannot get remarried, because why? There's no divorce. You cannot nullify that original marriage, but you can live apart separately. Okay. Legislation. Back in 2018, the Philippines introduced legislation to, well, make divorce a reality. And it got shot down quick. And it was just sort of left there. And recently, last year, new legislation was introduced, and it made a lot more progress. In May of 2024, House Bill 9349 was actually passed by the House. Barely. It's a hot potato. But they passed it, and they sent it over to the Senate in June of 2024. Well, here we are almost a year later, and the Senate hasn't even picked it up and looked at it. They've just kind of shelved it because it's a hot potato. And there's elections coming up this month. And so my thinking on this is that with the elections coming in, the changeover of power, that this bill that's laying in the Senate is just going to die its own little death. And it's going to be up to the newly elected officials to try and introduce it. However, there is a pretty big shift in attitude here amongst the Filipinos and the Filipinas in regards to divorce. Last year, they did a poll, and 50% of Filipinos are in favor of having a divorce law, that they are able to simply agree to disagree, part company, and become single yet once again. And therefore, they can meet somebody else, perhaps remarry, start a family, and do all the other normal stuff without breaking the law, i.e. adultery. 31% oppose it. And that's a pretty big shift. It's almost a flip-flop of the numbers from just about 13 or 14 years ago. So the population is generally shifting in favor of more freedom. Now, this is where you might get a little irritated with me, and it's something that I normally don't address here. I don't like to get involved in politics, especially at home, and I don't like to get involved in politics here. I also don't like to get involved in religion, but I'm going to do both. So go ahead and light me up in the comments all that you want. Being American, I was raised that there's to be a separation between church and state. And I'll just go out and say it. I'm a firm believer of that. I believe that parents should be able to take their children and school them in whatever religion they feel is beneficial to the child or what their personal faith system is. One little caveat that I'm going to throw in here is that if you're married here in the Philippines and you're of Muslim religion, Muslim faith, you can get a divorce. It's the Christians or the Catholics that cannot. And I won't get into the whole Muslim thing right now because that's just something you can research if you're interested in the dynamics behind that. But I found that very interesting. So it is a religiously based bias towards the idea of divorce. Now, what do you think? Do you think that that's right? Do you think that the church should have that much influence over the body of people here in the state or the country of the Philippines? My stance is no. I believe that if two people give it a shot, they try, there could be a number of reasons that people want to get divorced other than being bored with one another. For example, there could be infidelity. There could be drug use. One of them may decide to get a sex change. There could be violence. There could be the mistreatment of children. And you're telling me that the best we can do here in the Philippines is allow for a separation. And yet you cannot carry on with another person that you would consider to be a significant other. That's my spin on it. It's a very, very short video. I wanted to touch on the topic just to start the conversation. Hopefully, sometime in the future, in my mind, they will allow divorce to happen. And one caveat also is that a foreigner actually can get divorced from the Filipino and can also cause his Filipina to become single again also. How is that, you say? Well, I'll use myself as an example. I am married to May, my wife, for over 2 years now. And let's just say her and I agreed to disagree. We no longer want to be married. She wants to go her way. I want to go my way. I can go to America. I can file for divorce. They'll put up the usual notices in the newspaper. They will make an attempt to serve her. The service won't go through. She'll never show up in court because she can't even get into America, but I can. I show up in court. Boom, I win just by default of her not showing up. And I don't necessarily win all the assets or the kids or anything like that. However, I am divorced. Now, I can come back with that certificate. Let's see, I wrote it down. A divorce abroad. I come back with a form, not a form, but papers showing that I am divorced from May abroad. She can then take that, and that divorced abroad document is recognized for her also. Again, a timely process, but the Philippines doesn't get all worked up about it because our marriage, the foreigner to the Filipina, makes up less than 1% of all the marriages over here. But that's one of the things that I can kind of, it's fair, but it's not fair because I can also go to America, file for divorce, become a single man, and never hand over that paperwork to May. There's not a thing she can do about it. So I can come back over here and skip around as technically a single male while she is still a married female. Kind of an unbalance there. So it depends on the turpitude and the, I guess, the morality of the guy that's doing this or the foreigner that's doing this, and how is he going to treat his spouse after the fact. I'd be curious to hear your comments on that also. That's about it. There is no divorce. I don't think that divorce is going to happen anytime soon, but it would be, if I had a crystal ball, I couldn't pinpoint the date for you, but I've got to figure that it's going to eventually happen. If 50% of the Filipinos want it and there's enough pressure put on, I think that they should be allowed that proverbial second chance at life. A lot of people out here get married at a very young age, and therefore they may be acting impulsively, they may be acting emotionally, it may be pressure from the parents because possibly the girl is pregnant from the neighborhood kid, and that's how the parents want things to go. I fully understand and appreciate that, but it doesn't mean that two 19-year-olds getting married are going to feel the same way about themselves 10, 15, 20, 30 years later. And if they both need to get a fresh start on life, I don't see any harm in that. It's working in every other country on the planet. What do you think? Do you think it's time for the Philippines to maybe lighten up a little bit and have a little separation between church and state and give these people the opportunity to make up their own minds as to how they want their lives to go moving forward? All right, thanks for watching. I look forward to your comments, and we'll see you in the next video.